Welcome to Elixir Wizards, a podcast brought to you by SmartLogic, a custom web and mobile development shop.
This is Season 15, The State of the Stack. Join us for conversations about how the software development landscape is evolving.
Each episode examines observable shifts, what's driving those changes, and how people in the community are adapting in response.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Suggs, software developer at SmartLogic.
And I'm Emma Whamond, software developer at SmartLogic. And we're your hosts for Season 15, Episode 7. We're joined by Ellyse Cedeno, the founder of Heuristic Salvo, an engineer and a product leader with over 25 years of experience building everything from games to health tech systems to early internet platforms. In today's episode, we're looking at the parts that aren't being automated: curiosity, judgment, soft influence, and why the human side of engineering may be more important now than ever.
Hi, Ellyse. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this conversation. Ellyse has been around a number of different industries over a very interesting career that spanned Netscape, working on early search engines, Nickelodeon, medical research at Mount Sinai, multiverse, building role-playing games. And so for those folks just learning about you or meeting you, is there a thread that connects all those? Or is it really as varied as it looks from the outside?
Well, you're landing the first big question, the difficult one up front. Let's figure this out. I don't really have a great answer for this because just like the theme you talked about, curiosity. By the way, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I'm also autistic. So the ADHD part is like there's a certain amount of impulsivity, right? Like you want to do what you love to do. And I think like when I started working, that was totally by chance at early search engine companies building a search engine and and web crawler. It was a little bit just like, okay, I'm doing this on like one of the main search engines, but what does the real internet look like? What's the middle of it? What's the biggest part of it? At the time, that was Netscape. So I was like, okay, I got to go there and figure this out, like see what it's really like. So it was sort of just always following my nose and my passion. And you grow up like I grew up playing like 8-bit games on a Commodore 64. So just like a lot of programmers, it's like falling in love with computers. Gaming was an essential part of it. So like after Netscape, I knew a lot of people who were like able to start a company and in the mindset to do so. And I was like, instead of joining EA or something, why don't I start a company and we'll all learn how to do gaming, from there. So I think it's really down to that curiosity and interest, that sort of led me from one thing to another. And just to spend just a short while more on it, gaming moves fast. You hear about game devs sort of burning themselves out and everything like that. And I think the other counterbalance for me is something to do something that's slower and super meaningful, and that's healthcare, right? That's why I worked at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai doing research, and also like apps for chronic diseases. So there, you're moving really, really slow, but after you come out of a game company, you actually really welcome that. So it's a little bit of back and forth. That's kind of like the link between a lot of the companies that I'm working at.
And then how did that link, or how did this path then lead you into the world of Elixir? How did you come to this space?
Well, programming languages is something that I just love, right? So I've moved from Evernote to Joplin, and I have a list of programming languages that I'm just sort of invested in or want to like check out, right? When I started learning programming, I think Little Lisper was one of the first books that I read. So I was like functional programming was something that I loved from the very beginning. And then after that, you do a lot of imperative programming. But honestly, it was always like whether you're doing search engines or building massively multiplayer game backends, you're dealing with like parallel, concurrent, distributed systems. And in most languages, that kind of sucks. So in one of the things I do when I'm like playing with a new language is to see like how would I write this, like maybe a game backend in this new language. And when I saw Elixir, I read Sasha Urich's book on Elixir, Elixir in Action, and it just made so much sense with the processes and OTP and Gen server. And I was like, oh my God, this gets rid of all my deadlock problems, all the mutexes I need to like handle, and it just made it lovely. Caveat, yes, you can have circular references in processes and you can have this similar situation, but it's so much easier looking at a process topology compared to looking at all your locking orders. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, and I think for if you're doing that kind of work, then working with Beam is really, really awesome.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
So last year you gave a talk at Goatmeyer about overcoming a hardware phobia and getting into nerves. At a point in your career where most engineers would start specializing even harder, you picked up something brand new and gave a live breadboard demo of a theremin. So we've talked about your career, learning different things, exploring languages. What does it mean to you to take that or keep that beginner's mindset thing going decades in?
Beginner's mindset is really interesting, and it's nothing that I actively work on. I think really that all of us are curious by default, right? And what I've seen, I've managed a lot of people, is that when you're in it for your job day in, day out, and you're using the same technology day in, day out, you can get burnt out on it, right? And I think it's important to like try something different every so often because it reinvigorates you to explore something. That can mean a lot of discomfort because sometimes that means leaving your job or finding another position in your company. And it may not even. Honestly, sometimes the people who stick with it get their payday and they do really well. So there's something to be said for just sticking it out. But I think when you look at your internal happiness and you're like, okay, is this meaningful for me? Am I happy with every day that I'm spending on this thing? Then exploring is really important. So I think it's more about not letting yourself get stuck on doing the same thing because everyone I know wants to try things, wants to do something. So with the talk I gave at Goatmeyer on nerves, one of my hobbies is singing, choir, music, all of that. And to meld like, let me finally try to do something with, I call it wires, because I'm like really a programmer. So like actually like getting wires and plugging it into a breadboard and using like chips and stuff, that was a little scary for me. It all worked, but I tied it to my passion of music. The original talk, I was going to actually sing with the theremin, but as all things happen, you run out of time. So I got to demonstrate the theremin, but I did not get to sing it. I remember I was like, she's my ex now. Long story, but I was showing her and like we're both singers and like I was like, I'm gonna learn how to sing with this. It just didn't happen in time.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
nothing is like that hard. There's this thing that we're taught that's like, oh, if I try, this is a whole other topic. People go to school for this thing or whatever, right? But like really, when you go to something like today, I'm in Berlin. I went to Exheim, which is a hacker space, and people are there like making clothing. They're jamming on synthesizers and music. They're like doing all this like stuff all the time. And I'm sure most of them did not go to school for this. You just go there, you do it, you learn from other people, you learn by yourself, and it's amazing how fast you can pick up on things. So I think some of it is also like not letting the perfectionist sort of like mindset and like this is the orthodox way of doing something because you can always learn something. When I joined Mount Sinai Icahn School of Medicine, I joined the genetics and genomic sciences department. I did not know anything there, and I just had to learn it. It was a little bit like, yeah, it was a little bit like baptism under fire.
Takes a lot of courage to be a beginner. I think it takes a lot of confidence to be able to go back and say, yeah, I'm going to be okay being bad at something again.
I'm so glad because when I said perfectionism, I didn't really know how to tie it into what I was saying, but I knew it was there, right? And then you did it for me, which is like you can be afraid to try something because you're going to be bad at it. I sing, but I'm not that good at it. It's not like my natural talent. My natural talent is what I'm doing now, which is just I can blab. I can speak, I can go to a conference and speak in front of a group and I don't feel nervous about that's what I can do by default. But the stuff that I try to learn, I'm actually unfortunately not that great at it. But you don't have to be great at it. What matters is you have fun with it and being halfway decent, you can actually end up making something.
Sounds like you maybe place some importance in spending time with passion projects or experimenting as part of just growing as an engineer, but also just staying happy and interested in work with technology.
Yeah, and I think passion projects is kind of like there's a couple of ways to look at this, like just to reframe what you just said. It's like you place importance in doing something that you enjoy, that you don't hate doing. And yes, I think that's important. And I think like when sometimes we're told like work has to suck or what you spend most of your time doing has to suck. And that's just not, I don't, you know, believe that, right? So whether that means finding a different job, whether it means finding ways to split your time, whether it means living an unconventional life in a way, like right now I'm doing kind of strange sort of like set of consultancy sort of work. Um, I think you can find that mix. And passion projects, it's a funny thing because in tech, the world changes so fast, right? It changes so fast that if you just assume that you went to school or you read a book and you know how to do something, that's not going to work for you for forever. You need to kind of like keep with the times or what's actually used changes all the time and how we do things change all the time. So most people don't only learn that at work. It means like going out of your way and trying to learn some of that yourself. So I think that's where like, the passion sort of matters with working inside of tech.
Do you think the passion makes it easier to like make the time for it? Because I don't know, for me at least, it feels like it can be hard to make time for side projects after, working full-time job, and I have other things that I do too. It can be hard to then also make time for that and to like consistently keep with it for weeks and weeks. How do you make that work?
This is a really great question, and there's a very difficult, this is going to be a sort of a hot take.
I love it.
I think that a lot of us prioritize a lot of things that make our lives very difficult and very, very full of things we have to take care of. We put pressures on ourselves, and whether that means all the mortgages, debts, the whatever it is, like whatever you're feeling, you're thinking about, it's like, oh, there's this tendency to be like, oh, I think I can add that one more thing in my life, right? But you add these things, and next thing you know, you have no free time to explore, to sort of like have that time to yourself. And I think just like, people say block out your calendar at work or whatever, like we have to block out and protect time for ourselves, whether that means it's a passion project or whether that just means decompressing at home, spending time. I've spent my time I grew up in New York and then I moved over to the Bay Area and I did a lot of startups there, right? The common denominator is people work a lot. And depending on the company, it's like there's a certain like pride in working more. And when you do that, it means you have no time for your life and yourself. I've lived in France for 9 years now. It's a very different culture, right? It's a
Yeah.
very different culture where it's like, even though there's startups that give you unlimited time off in the US, people in France, it's like no one has to, if you say I'm taking 3 weeks off, there's no question unless there's literally like some kind of incompatibility in the schedule. It really has to be a big deal for them to deny you. And there's no shame in like turning your phone off. But when I work and consult for a US company, it's always like, I'm going away for 3 days, but I'll have my phone. You can reach me. How much do you think you're decompressing and able to enjoy yourself and explore your interests when you're in that mindset? Right? So, I'm not giving you an easy answer. It's something that I think people have to give themselves so that they don't end up filling their life with stress. And this has nothing to do with technology, right? It just has to do with how you manage your life. So, there's that. Second part is work can be your passion project, right? Like you can really enjoy your work and work can give you, depending on where you are and, how you work with your managers and whatever, you can find time to explore and do things that you love.
I love that. um, I think that allows you to, at least to your first point, like allows you to have that space for curiosity again, right? In order to decompress. Then you can take it back to that second point where you get to reset and go, like, what can I do to make my work like part of my passion project, or like how do I give it back to work so that I'm curious and passionate again?
If you're happy, you'll do better. And like
Yeah.
when I was at Netscape, I learned how to fly a plane. But what I just did is I would just duck out and go to the airport in Palo Alto. Netscape was in Mountain View. And I would just be gone for 2 hours every so often. I didn't really ask anyone or tell anyone. I just did it. And every now and then I'd come back and there would be a fire. But if you're good at your job, they're not going to fire you, right? So, like, sometimes you have to stop being a people pleaser and just do it. Just do what you need to do.
Yeah. Just make the time for what you need.
Make the
Prioritize
time
what you need.
and don't feel guilty about it because when this is over, you're not going to be thinking, I wish I spent those 2 extra hours in meetings.
Mhm.
That is so true. um, Outside of flying planes and singing and playing the theremin, do you have any other non-engineering or engineering hobbies that you'd like to mention?
I have a lot of hobbies. I have a list, the autism thing. I have a list of hobbies that I'd love to do or that I do enjoy doing. Language is one of them. I moved to France because I wanted to learn French. I saw like my mother would have like these cosmetic things and they all be like, French names. As you probably know, there's a lot of cosmetics and skincare that come from France. And I was like, look at these like little marks on these letters. What could this mean? So yeah, it stayed with me and then I came to France to learn languages, to learn French. So I really love languages and the choir I sing in is a Japanese choir. I'm working on understanding that, but I sing in Japanese. I understand very little of what I sing, but I hope to change that soon. So yeah. And prior to that, I loved dance, like ballet and jazz and modern. The curse of this is that you only have so many hours in your day, right? And I'm trying to do the thing that I said earlier, which is like give myself time. So I can't just do back to back everything.
And there's seasons, right? You come back to
Yeah,
it and
you remember it, right? Like it sticks with you.
Hmm.
Unless it's okay, here's the embarrassing thing. I don't know how many programmers admit to this, but I forget syntax all the time. I get so stressed because like you ever do pair programming, someone's looking at your screen, right?
Oh, it's the
And
worst.
then so like I'm writing some code and then I'm like, wait, do I put a do here? Wait, and then you just blank out on some basic syntax. And you're like, oh my God, my coworker must think I'm a freaking idiot. But, I mean, these days, a lot of people use like Cursor or something. It just writes it all for you, right? But I mean, still, you want people to think you actually know basic syntax. I forget it all the time.
Gets worse for me too when I'm hopping between languages,
Exactly.
especially if they're different paradigms, like functional and something else, like going from Elixir to JavaScript to Clojure to, you know,
Yeah, for me, it's actually harder when it's within the same realm. Like if you go from Haskell to Elixir and Erlang, something like that,
mm,
like there's similarities in like how you do comprehensions or how you just like do lists or whatever, but there's little changes like, oh, this one uses brackets, this one uses whatever, and like
sure.
the tuples here and parentheses here, it's embraced. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I bet the people who just write Java every day for the last 30 years, they don't forget. So there's something to be said for, doing that. I hate to rag on Java, but I'm glad I'm not programming Java every day.
Same.
I hear JVM's great. I was just talking to a friend of mine about Clojure. One day I'll
Mm,
check it out. But
yeah.
yeah.
Clojure's fun. I like it.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot
I
of hype
prefer
behind
Elixir,
it.
but I like Clojure.
I did a startup in Scheme. Here's the funny thing. I did a startup in Scheme. It was like a microblogging startup, and Scheme is known to be one of the simplest languages out there, right? And this was in the Bay Area. We were in Sunnyvale. And one of the biggest problems we had VC money, so we're trying to do the normal thing of hiring like 50 engineers really fast. I could not get engineers who would program in Scheme. And the people we did hire, they had a hard time grasping it. I think it's parentheses that people don't like. I have no idea. It seemed I don't I really just don't understand. But this was when like, developers sort of like ruled everything and they could like dictate everything. So perhaps they were just like, I'm not doing Scheme, so no.
We could command a little bit more.
Yeah, now it's just like, where's the AI interviewer? No, I haven't had to face that, but I see the videos.
In this season, our conversations are exploring how the role of the developer is changing. It's becoming more cross-disciplinary, but that's maybe been kind of a long-running change. And I think a lot of us kind of become more cross-disciplinary to a degree as we spend more time with the craft. But it's also becoming more AI assisted. And you have to exercise more judgment than just like writing code nowadays. Um, how do you think engineers today are expected to bring more than just technical execution to the job? Maybe it's not just judgment. Maybe there's other skills too. What do you see there?
I think when you say like there's what they're expected to bring, that's changing. But I would sort of like push back on like, is that what's the best thing also? Because what's happening, I see a very interesting difference between like, because I live in France, now I'm in Berlin, but like Europe, and then I also lived in Dublin, Ireland for a while, and also, the Bay Area where I still do a lot of consulting with clients. And a lot of the trends start out in the US. And they're very different. Like if I ask my friends, a lot of developers here, they're barely using any AI whatsoever, right? And when they do, they're using like an internal model that's quite like old compared to like what's live on Claude or something else, right? Expectations that I see is that like developers are expected to really use AI agents and like flows to do a lot. In fact, like one startup I was at, I was doing some pair programming and I wrote the code. And one of the executives were like, "What are you doing? Why are you writing code?" And I was like, What do you mean? This is what developers do, right?" And they're like, "You're you could go much like you should never write code. Just like, only look at PRs from the thing." And there's a certain like group of, companies that have fully embraced this mentality, in which case like their developers are expected to basically push, like, I hate to say this, lines of code out into the system. I thought we kind of moved away from lines of code, but we hear it so often, like with AI, I can do 20,000, 100,000 lines of code a day or whatever. And I think like managing AI is something that a lot of companies are expecting people to do. And that's a skill set, right? Like understanding what the business needs and then being able to work with LLMs to produce that kind of code. Now, that's the expectation side of things that I think we see forming and that hasn't reached, like, depending on where you, the listener, are, like, you may not see any of this yet. And maybe, maybe you never will, but that's sort of what I've been seeing, especially in smaller, like, VC funded startups. Now, but expected, but like what's actually useful in terms of like soft skills and developers sort of like working within a company, I think that's actually different. It's always been different because like when you as a developer are only thinking about, you know, can I actually execute this technically? There's a whole side of like, how do I communicate and work with the rest of the company? How well do I understand the business goals, right? And how well can I influence and like, actually be a part of the decision making here? And that's what's going to help your career and help your position within a company. And here's another hot take. Companies never tell you what's important for them. They set KPIs, they set like their goals that they use in communications, but you don't always just work for the company. You're working for your manager, you're working for whoever else on top, and they all have their own goals and their own fears. And, like the higher you are up in a company, you're working more and more on how you're managing to the rest of the company and how much you're afraid to fuck up, right? So one of the key things I think is when you talk to, when you look at your position in a company and is to understand what what are the things that the company, my managers and everyone, what are we trying to do and what's the stuff they're not telling me? What are their fears? What's keeping them from like sleeping well at night, And if you can solve those problems or even show that you understand those problems, then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my God, there's a weight lifted off of me. I can trust this person. This person is a partner for me in solving these problems." Because like it's not always a meritocracy. It's not always you do better work and there, it's seen. This is why we hear so often, I did the work, someone took credit. And like they get the promotion, I didn't. What the hell just happened? So, there's a lot of that too. So those are some of the skills or things to think about when you're working within a group.
Can you give us an example of a way that someone could express or like how they could express that they understand those goals or those details?
Every company has different ways of like working together, right? I'm a strong believer in one-on-ones with your manager. And if you're in a company where they don't do that, usually I find that you can request it. You can be like, hey, Mr. Miss Manager friend of mine, do you think we can meet every so often, once a week, once every 2 weeks? And for you, it might seem like, damn, another meeting that I have. But this is the chance for you to like have undivided attention and like one, understand what's going on, and two, show them that you understand, and three, like that you make progress towards that, right? So I think that's really important. Don't even be afraid of requesting the same thing to your boss's boss if you're in a large company, you know? Don't be afraid of like, don't ever be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask that of the CEO, right? Just see what happens because we put all these self-limiting ideas in our head. And then when you have that chance, it doesn't have to be every week. Just when you have that chance, you can first like feel it out with them, right? Like, hey, like what are some of the things that you're noticing that we're having a hard time getting done, or what could we do better, or whatever. And then you can talk about it with them. And that's when they can recognize that you're actually listening, you care, and that you understand. So I don't think it has to be that difficult. And then always try to find ways to like, once you feel more comfortable, to disseminate that information to others. If they see you actively trying to like, address it and make sure other people know it. There was one guy I know who would always write like product documents or like summaries of something and put his name on it. Even if it was like my meeting, he would put his name on it. And I asked him, why do you always do that? What are you doing? He goes like, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he who controls the document, puts their name on it, gets credit for it. And I'm like, damn. And he became a really big person in Amazon, is doing big things now. Like, I think he had something there.
I feel like there's a little bit of a common thread through a lot of this of curiosity, of staying curious about technology and new things, staying curious about what are the motivating factors behind what we're doing here? What are we really trying to achieve? What are the goals that we really have? How can I do this better? What's a different way? And I feel like that kind of connects into some of what you've talked about with soft influence and how you can maybe shift things in a direction that you would like to see them to go without like banging it over people's heads or dragging them along, but perhaps maybe getting people to buy in and be open or into that as well. You gave a talk recently called Softly Surely, Bringing Elixir to Work. It's a great talk. Maybe you can dive a little bit more into kind of that core idea of soft influence in engineering culture and how that is beneficial.
When I started this gaming company, we started growing. So the CEO, I was CTO. The CEO's like, hey, we should bring a VP of engineering. So, my role would be more like technology direction and speaking to outside people. And the VP of engineering would sort of manage engineering. But like we were a team that really had a lot of fun. We played D&D together, like it was when you play D&D together, you're a tight group, right? But like when we hired him, one of the first things he said to me was like, I need these people to report to me. And I asked him why. And he said, because like, how else am I going to get them to do anything unless I can fire them? Right? Right? I mean, and this isn't something that's like, oh, that was back then. No, this is today. Like there's still people, there's maybe most people, I don't know. This is not something rare. But like when you look at soft influence, I think it's almost better for you to say like, I'm happy that I have no hard power over people because if we can manage to do something together when I can't force your hand, then I know we're actually doing it together, And they don't feel that pressure. Like if you're managing people, try hanging out with them after work. It's not always easy. They don't, it's like, oh, you're my boss. Like, it's a little bit hard, but like, it's actually beneficial often, I think, to just sort of like be able to work with people because now they see you as a partner, as a colleague, as a peer. So, yeah, I've always enjoyed that kind of situation. So when you start with that assumption that like, okay, well, they're asking me to get this project through, through the door or whatever, shipped, but I have no real control over anything. How do I get this done? It probably means talking to people, probably means figuring out how they feel, and then it probably means like when you see issues, bring it up to people that, can help fix it. Now, if you are a developer, that doesn't mean you can't also do some of these things, right? Like I've done roles where I was, you know, purely technical, purely like leading technology, project management, product management, marketing, analytics, lead, whatever. But like in all of these things, like I've always just said, okay, that's my role, but like at the end of the day, we want to get this done. And so if every team member sort of has this approach, especially you, then I think that's very, very helpful. I don't know if I've given any strategy to do that, but I think part of it is starting with that mindset that you don't have to fire them. You don't have to threaten to fire them. That's not how you work with your partner, right? I hope not. It's like, oh, if you don't get those groceries tonight, you're fired and you only get one chance. No, it's your soft skills, hopefully, to get that to work. And if you're yelling at them too much, that only works for so long.
And I think in the situation where you're working with people through more soft influence, more carrots versus stick, more collaboration as a team, as opposed to kind of this top-down fear stick kind of motivator, people will be more trusting and more willing to dive in and work with you and maybe put up with some other things that are unpleasant because, well, I've got more of a partner in this person as opposed to someone I need to fear.
Yeah, and like let's be honest, like not all companies are well suited for this, right? Like if you're working at a company where the goals are changing every week, that the teams are getting like from up high, like here's your new product. We've changed everything. What can I say, right? Like you're not going to be able to keep people happy in that environment. No one can, right? And that's when you have to be realistic and think like, is this somewhere that I want to be? Because you can probably stick it out, but at some point when you look around and everyone's demoralized, there's only so much you can do. And at that point you could try to convince upper management that, this is a problem and why don't you let's try this approach for a little while, figure out why they're afraid to change the approach or something like that. But at that point, you have nothing to lose because you know what's going to happen after a certain amount of time. It's just not going to work. And unfortunately, a lot of times, this is pretty common. And then you see like people cycle in and out of the company. So that's just some straight talk there.
So true. Yeah, hopefully you get to the point where it's about respect than fear. You respect this person, you respect the team, you're excited about the team.
Right.
What's the saying that you don't quit a company, you quit the manager?
Exactly. Exactly.
So in a talk of yours, you described a story of a company that almost didn't hire you because you seemed too FP, too functional programming, and you snuck a Discord import server into production in Elixir anyways. Could you walk us through what was going through your head when you typed git push and you clicked enter? Or just in general, that story.
I actually remember pressing the button there. It was at the end of the day. Right. So let's set some context here, right? So this is a TypeScript shop and they love their types, right? Like so much type loving. Um, The back in the day when you had C++ and people used multiple inheritance and you just couldn't figure out where anything was. It was like that, but with types. And but anyway, so yeah, and they were like, oh, maybe you're too functional programmed because during my interview I was talking about Elixir, I was talking about Haskell, and they're like, oh my God, we know where this is coming from. Anyway, so what I did was there was a pretty much like separate project where we needed to get Discord information into the database and like have it interact and all this kind of stuff. And I've been using Nostrum on which is an Elixir package that that basically is a Discord bot framework. And so I just decided to write that up because it seemed like it wouldn't contaminate the code base or anything like that. It would be a separate repository. And when I pushed it, I remember thinking, I wonder if they're going to yell at me in the morning, right? And then not only did I do it for Discord, I then did it again for a debugging tool because we just couldn't get enough information about the runtime, like because it was almost like a runtime operating system. And so I wrote it in Elixir also. But I also use Gleam because like it interacts with JavaScript pretty well, and there was, all this TypeScript stuff. So there was a whole story behind it. But both times they're like, "Oh, you wrote this thing. This looks really cool, whatever." And then there'd be a moment where like, "Oh, it's an Elixir." I'd be like, "Yeah." They're like, "Okay." So so I was like, "Okay, look, I didn't get fired, right? I'm still alive." And usually you don't go from like being fined to getting fired. It's not unless you do something really bad. So that's the approach I take. There was a video game that I used to love playing. I don't remember what it was. I think it was like World of Warcraft, and I would play it safe all the time. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die, but my friend would die all the time. I'd be like, dude, you're dying all the time. What's going on? He goes, if you don't die every so often, it means you're not being efficient. And you think about it, it's like, I'm playing it safe. That means I'm like, it's like when you do a negotiation and you're like, all right, I'll sell it to you for $100. And they're like, sure, done. And you're like, shit, you should have asked for 200, right? It's like that. So like, unless sometimes they're actually saying, hey, you really shouldn't have done that, it kind of means you're not dying enough. You're not being efficient enough. You're not getting enough of what you need, what you want. So that's something I kind of took to heart.
Curious, once those Elixir tools were put into use and put into production at the TypeScript shop, and they were in use for a little bit of time, was there any secondary like, hey, this is working really well, we don't have to spend much time maintaining it, or this is actually kind of problematic for us to maintain in our larger system? Like, was there a longer story to that, or it just kind of was a nothing once it was in service?
I don't think that there was either like, oh, this opened the door for like a whole bunch of different languages to be used, nor did it say like, oh, this was a huge mistake. It was something that like, oh, this worked for what it needed to be. And I think that it means that if there was other occasions to actually like build something, that people can think about using the best tool for the job. And I think that it did open up like a lot of the possibilities of using Gleam forward because like it's a really nice way to either to actually compile to the JavaScript target or to the Beam target. And there's pros and cons for both, but I think it was very interesting for them.
Would you still categorize that as soft influence?
This is a really good question. I don't know. I don't even know, like, soft influence. It's kind of like saying, did anyone give me the hard authority to say you're deciding what technology stack we're using, right? And the answer is no. And you want to like move to a certain direction. You think it'll be good. right? And in this case, it was also for my self-edification. I enjoyed doing it, right? Remember I said like you're writing Java code for 30 years or whatever. I didn't want to be writing TypeScript every day, right? And I remember when I started writing in Gleam and Elixir, I was like, oh, this feels so much better. Sorry, TypeScript people. Like, oh God, it just felt so much better, right? And so, like, yeah, I would guess I would still say it's something different from hard authority, right? And exercise it as often as you can.
What does soft influence look like when it fails? Is that just a, no, we're not willing to go that direction? Is that it? Have you noticed, have you had experiences?
I love this question. So, like, I don't know if I'm answering exactly that, but like, you ever have like a project manager who's like you can tell they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just like, "Okay, I heard you. So like this project sounds like it's going to be late," and you just told them like the database is ruined. There's no way in hell this is ever going to go live. Like, can we do some brainstorming and like figure out like you're just like, "Have you not heard a single word of what I just said? This is this is DOA. Like, there's no way we're going to succeed here." So I feel like soft influence fails when you just have the soft and you have none of sort of like, why would anyone follow you if you look like or sound like you have no idea what you're talking about, right? Let's use Elixir. Why? Because I heard there's like this process thing and like there's some kind of supervisors that like, I don't know, self-healing and offensive programming. It's super cool. Like, no, that's not gonna work, right? Like, learn your stuff, make sure you can talk about it. Don't be lazy about it. Like
Mhm.
someone sending you an email and say, "What's your thoughts on this?" I hate those emails because it means they didn't think about it at all, right? So soft skills work when you can back yourself up with some actual knowledge and actual talent, right? So don't go in there thinking I'm a dev and I love all of this soft skill stuff. I'll go for it all the way. You know, let's try to meet our KPIs. Let's try. No, like, know what you're talking about so that you can actually do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's the extreme example, someone who does it all on their own. They don't work with a team, but they're super competent, right? There's the other example, they can't do anything on their own and they need the whole team, but they don't know what's going on. Like, you need both. Try to be somewhere where you actually have, some competencies on both sides. So that's where I think soft skills make you look stupid, you're cringe, stop doing it.
What um I feel like that's a good segue to this question we have about what
Sorry,
does it look what
I'm giving you honest answers.
no, honesty is great. Honesty is great. A place that I worked at, there was a project manager from a different firm that we were collaborating with, and a coworker was blocked in a number of tickets, and the project manager comes in and says, "Oh, I can unblock you," and just changes the status of the tickets to in progress. Like, there, you're unblocked.
Voila, you're how awesome. Thank you so much for unblocking me. I just didn't know how to use, whatever Jira or something, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that was
It
all
was
that it
Jira.
took. Don't be that person, right? I've been thinking I really wish I could like help people, as when you manage people, you try to mentor them to succeed in their careers. It's really hard, and I've talked to other people who tried to do. It's really hard to help someone like have that, I don't know, business empathy to just sit there and understand what the other side is, you know, when they said this, it means that they're concerned it's going to fail. When they said this, it means they don't want to do it. Like there's so many conditions to all of it. It's really hard to just say here's the like, flow chart or something like that. But you do have to know when you're running into a hard wall that you can't get around, that you're using up your credits in a sense, and that you should just stop. It's not going to work. Or like, okay, I can sense the hesitancy. I can sense that they're half open to doing it, but there's some concerns there. One book that I really, really love is by William Ury, Ury. I think it's like a Harvard book. It's called Getting Past No. And it's a negotiation book. And, I am not a negotiator. I don't believe in like, used car salesman, but this is a different approach where it's like really about like long-term durable agreements and understanding why people have concerns. I think they talk a lot about like trying to understand the other side, understanding what their concerns are, making sure that they see that you understand, and all of these steps to getting past a no. But I think you can tell after a while whether or not they are like, there's no way to get past it. And then you have to like cut your losses. Isn't there a song like a country song, know when to hold 'em, when to fold 'em?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Sometimes you have to give it up. What does it look like? I don't know that it looks like anything in particular. Sometimes it's just like when your code fails, it doesn't compile, right? You don't go like, ah, damn it, like it's over. You can try again. But once they're like looking pissed at you, it's time to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good sign. Maybe stop slightly before they're pissed at you. If you can notice, that little twitch is starting, whatever their tell is. Okay, time.
Yeah, or it's a great opportunity because you can be like, oh, it looks like you're upset about something. Can you tell me like why? Like what's frustrating? Well, it's just because you keep saying this. And it's like, okay, but why is that a problem? Like, what do you think might happen? And then you might open a whole door, right? Sometimes it takes to the very end before you get a breakthrough. So there's no like single answer for this. And as you keep doing it, you build an intuition for it. I really wish there was a better answer for this. Ask your friends, ask your mentors, sometimes ask your manager. They can help you. Don't do it always all alone.
That's great advice. I feel like a lot more people need to hear that than they realize. So for developers listening who feel boxed into a narrow career path or disconnected from the reasons that they got into programming in the first place, do you have any advice for them? And what's something that they could do, something that they could start practicing their own?
There's a funny thing. I do a bunch of streaming too. Not recently, but I have. And when I do programming streaming, one of the top questions is like, how do I enjoy coding? And these are beginner coders, right? And I'm like, you shouldn't be asking this question. If you're learning to code and you hate it, then, you're not enjoying it, then there's a problem like right up front. It's kind of like, oh yeah, like so I just started, dating this person and like we're always like fighting. How do we stop fighting? It's like, God, you're 3 dates in and you're fighting every day? This is a problem, Find someone else. And I think we saw a lot of it because programming was viewed as like a great way to have like make money and everything like that, right? And so there's that answer for people who are early on, like find something you want to do because you actually enjoy it. If you hate it from the very beginning, I took a biology class, I hate it, but how do I succeed in getting my PhD in biology? Well, no. But if you are programming for a long time and you used to love it and you find that you no longer love it, then I think it's just like, all right, God, this is going to be controversial. Is, like when you have a child, you often go into parent mode and it takes up your whole life, right? It's everything. And after a while, like you kind of forget some people. forget like what they love. And once they start having free time, there has to be a moment of rediscovery of like, what what am I about? What do I like to do? And there's a couple of things here. One, just like and this happens with work, that's the analogy. Like work becomes all consuming until the point where you're just working for work and you forget like that at some point before, you had other things going on. So I think there's two things. One is if you're starting to notice it before it fully happened, then you carve out that time like we talked about before, and don't do programming, do other things. It'll help you actually enjoy programming. It's kind of like ironic, but like do something else. Um, but like when you do finally find the time to do it, do something that you actually enjoy doing at the moment. Don't think about the end result. So many people think about the end result and say, I'm learning this language just to do X and Y. If you don't enjoy actually like learning it and playing with it, then it's going to be really hard because you're always going to be measuring yourself to that perfect goal that you're trying to achieve. And that goes back to, Emma, what you said about perfectionism. So really, that's the thing that kills the curiosity and passion. There's a great TED Talk, I forget whose name it is, on how the educational system kills curiosity. And a lot of that has to do with perfectionism, So go look at that TED Talk.
Gosh, I wish I could talk to you for the next like 10 hours.
Well, 10
You're so
hours is a bit
interesting.
long.
Maybe a little bit. I think you have enough to fill it though. I think we're at time. Is there anything you want to mention that our listeners can follow your work, where they can keep up with what you're building? Any last or final plugs for the audience?
My latest passion thing has been building that MMORPG game server in Elixir. I just did a talk on it recently at ElixirConf EU, and it was really fun. I ran out of time. I had a talk that was supposed to be like 40 minutes, and like when I noticed that like I was a quarter of the way through and it was like almost over, and I was like, God damn it. This is what, but the problem is I don't rehearse. I just kind of just start talking just like this, right? And yeah, I could just keep talking. So anyway, I'm doing that, and the game server is I put it all on Codeberg. GitHub is at 0.9s now, so go use Codeberg or whatever, something else. Yeah, I'll be talking about it more, but you can search. I'm really easy to find. If you type my name in, you'll see my link to Codeberg, my LinkedIn, whatever. And really, like if you're listening or watching, connect with me. I approve pretty much all links, all requests. So like, let's talk.
I tried to find your talk on that. I don't think they've published a video of it yet.
They haven't published it, but if you went to the conference in what's it called, the app, the conference app, you can actually find the talk. But they will eventually publish it, and I think it is. I think it's going to be soon. They're not intending to keep it like paywalled or whatever for very long.
Yeah. That would be my assumption too.
Oh, and there's the Goatmeyer. I'm on the program committee for Goatmeyer, which is coming up. So check that out. It's going to be an awesome conference, and I will be there. And I'm not talking there. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy everyone else. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Definitely had some FOMO from missing the last one.
Yeah, it was so awesome. You talk to most people, they're like, "Oh my God, it was like an experience." So
cool. Well, Ellyse, I would love to keep this conversation going longer as well. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful conversation. Look forward to seeing you in person at some point at one of these conferences somewhere.
Yeah, let's meet up.
Very good. Folks, our guest has been Ellyse Cedeno. You can find her at all the places that Ellyse just mentioned. We'll have a number of things in the show notes, so thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Elixir Wizards is a production of Smart Logic. You can find us online at smartlogic.io.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. This episode was produced and edited by Paloma Pachenik for Smart Logic.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another episode of The State of the Stack.
Hey, this is Yair Flicker, president of Smart Logic, the company that brings you this podcast. Smart Logic is a consulting company that helps our clients accelerate the pace of their product development. We build custom software applications for our clients, typically using Phoenix and Elixir, Rails, React, and Flutter for mobile app development. We're always happy to get acquainted, even if there isn't an immediate need or opportunity. And, of course, referrals are always greatly appreciated. Please email contact@smartlogic.io to chat. Thanks, and have a great day.